Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. Looking real good in my passport photo.
Amateur Traveler, episode 716. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about jazz and Shakespeare, wine and steak, football and tanking as we go to the state of Nebraska. 500,000 sandhill cranes can't be wrong. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Let's talk about Nebraska. I'd like to welcome to the show Gina Imm from Nebraska, who has come to talk to us about her home state. Gina, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you, Chris.
And Gina, I see you're from Nebraska. You're living in Phoenix now, but does one ever get Nebraska out of their system after they move away? So,
truly, once from Nebraska, always from Nebraska.
And Nebraska is one of only 3 states in the 15 years of the show we have not covered. So I've been really wanting to do this show, I think, for a while. I have actually spent vacations in Nebraska. So why should someone go to Nebraska?
Well, that is a great question. And a lot of people, when they hear I'm from Nebraska, ask me that question as well. So I think that the State Tourism Board, they just came out with a motto that actually made me laugh. The motto is Nebraska. Honestly, it isn't for everyone. And then it goes into all these awesome things that you can do in Nebraska. But I think that someone who loves a good road trip, likes to go off the beaten path, maybe not as mainstream as some other areas, that is who is going to love to go to Nebraska.
Well, and I should say that I have had at times 4 different podcasts, and one of them was the Passport Travel Marketing and PR podcast. And if you go find that show, you can find an interview with the head of Nebraska Tourism talking about that very motto and how it came about and what they meant by it and that whole program. So excellent. Well, what kind of itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
Well, I think that we should start in Omaha, Nebraska, which is the largest city. You're going to fly in here, and you can fly pretty much any major airline into that airport. Mm-hmm. And also this itinerary, I should know, is going to take place in the summer. So Nebraska has 4 seasons, and the winter can be quite extreme. And it's just not quite as fun. It's beautiful, but the weather is so extreme that I would definitely recommend doing during the summer. So we're going to fly into Omaha, and we're going to stay in the Old Market area downtown. It's absolutely gorgeous. So you can go on some horse-drawn carriages. You can see farmers markets on the weekends. But the main thing in Omaha is the Henry Doorly Zoo. So many times throughout the years, it has been rated the #1 in the world, and it's for good reason. So it has an aquarium that is also with the zoo, and I truly don't think there's one thing there that is missing. they are continuously adding on. And I was actually just looking at the website, and they actually have overnight experiences that families can do now, which I think is really awesome. We're going to go to the zoo, experience that. That's probably a whole day event. They have this new Skyfari, they call it, and it's ski lifts and it goes over, and so you can see the animals from above. And I just think that's awesome. Like, so if you get tired or if you just want a different view, just hop on that. It is extra. It's only $6 round trip though. So I think I've been on it. It's pretty awesome.
Okay.
So some other things in Omaha to do. There are many museums. Just two would be the Jocelyn Art Museum, the Durham Museum. I know museums aren't everybody's thing, but just the architecture in those buildings is absolutely gorgeous. Just do a walkthrough or go have coffee nearby. Absolutely gorgeous.
And sorry, was the Jocelyn Art Museum, and what was the second one?
And both really affordable to get into. The Durham's $11 for admission.
Well, and the Jocelyn Art Museum, my impression is that it's a fine art museum rather than a modern art museum.
Yes.
Okay.
And then the Durham is more of like it goes through exhibits on immigration and who settled into Omaha.
Okay.
And the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad, which is really important throughout Nebraska's history.
Sure.
So kind of more of those type of things.
Well, and the one thing we should say, if people don't know Nebraska, I know Nebraska considers itself the first state in the West. So some people may culturally put it in the Midwest, which I think it isn't an awkward fit either, but it definitely considers itself more of a Western state, so more tied to things like the Union Pacific Railroad going through.
Yes, absolutely. Some other things that we can do after we're done with the museum, or maybe after you're done with the zoo, is go to Jazz on the Green or Shakespeare on the Green. And I personally think evenings in Nebraska are just absolutely gorgeous during the summer. The weather's good, and you can just sit out and just listen to jazz or listen to a play, and it's just really peaceful. That's one of the things I like to do in the afternoon.
And the Jazz on the Green or the Shakespeare on the Green are summer programs that are offered. They're not particularly associated with a festival in the summertime?
Nope. They're typically, Jazz on the Green is typically every Thursday.
Okay.
At 7:30 p.m. Shakespeare on the Green, I believe, is during the week as well.
Okay.
And those events are both free.
Okay.
To the public. While we're in Omaha, another beautiful area to go is the Lorenzen Gardens. They are gorgeous botanical gardens that are really well maintained. And a little tip that I would give is check their event page, because they do have some really awesome events throughout the year. Example, sometimes they do yoga, or they might have a photography little session that might go through. So if you check their events page, you can really get in on some cool activities.
Okay. Well, and you say another cool neighborhood, and you started us in Old Market, but I don't have a mental picture for what's in Old Market other than potentially an Old Market, but I'm just guessing at that.
Yes. Okay. So the Old Market is the downtown area of Omaha. As you walk along, there's cobblestone streets, there's restaurants on every corner, there's little bars that you can go to. I feel kind of quaint. The buildings are older.
Two, 3-story brick buildings is what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And then you have the horse-drawn carriages. And for example, like the Magnolia Hotel down there is one that I would recommend staying in, just because of the rooms are gorgeous and it just fits in that vibe of the Old Market.
Magnolia Hotel does not sound like something that would then have Omaha at the end of it. But
I know. Omaha is full of surprises. Okay, so one thing that Omaha is famous for is the College World Series that's in June for baseball.
Okay.
That brings in tons of tourists. So if you happen to be visiting during June, during those dates, you can expect quite a few people to be in the area. Where it's held is close to the Old Market, so that area is particularly busy.
And have you been to the College World Series?
This is so pathetic, but I have never been. And I lived in Omaha for a few years, and I just never went. But a lot of my friends, it is an event. So many people go. So many people come from different states, but I just never made it.
I know people who live just outside New York who've never been to the Statue of Liberty. So, this
Yep,
is a
the
familiar
same.
story.
Yes. Yes. The closer it is, the harder it is to get to, I guess. Okay. So then there's going to be, where should we eat in Omaha? And Omaha has amazing restaurants, which to some people come as a surprise because they don't realize how large Omaha is. There's several different neighborhoods. So the Old Market we already mentioned, where I would recommend staying. Truly, there's anything that you pick down there is going to be great. If you just walk and, you see something that catches your eye, I recommend just stopping and taking a peek at what it has to offer. So then we have some other neighborhoods. So Dundee, that's actually home to Warren Buffett. Fun fact, that's where one of his houses is, or where he's from.
Okay.
There is a pizza place there called Pitch. I love it. And I especially love it because they have a new location, and guess where they built it? In Phoenix. And so I thought that was a sign. I couldn't believe it. And then another neighborhood is Benson. Has pretty great restaurants, coffee shops, bars. The Benson Brewery has phenomenal food. I would recommend eating there if you want some dinner. It's pretty casual, but it's great. As you can see, I'm mentioning different neighborhoods, and I should have stated when we flew into Omaha that I would highly recommend taking a car or renting a car.
Okay.
You could, if you're just going to visit Omaha, let's say you're just coming for the College World Series, you could get away with just taking Ubers or Lyfts, but I would, if you really want to experience the area, car rental is a must.
Well, and you mentioned something about a lot of people don't know how big Omaha is. So I had to look it up because I don't know how big Omaha is. And so it's about 400, a little less than 500,000 people, a little less than 500,000 people right now. So, if you're from Wyoming, that's the population of practically the whole state. If you're from California, that's, half the size of my hometown of San Jose. If you're from China, it's a small village. So,
Yes,
it depends on what you're used to. But
And then how Omaha is laid out, it actually shares, so it's right next to the Iowa border, and Council Bluffs is right on the other side. You almost can't tell the difference between the two cities. So if you combine that in there, it also boosts up the population a little bit.
Sure.
Omaha is great, and I think we're going to move on to the next little bit of area. It's just outside of Omaha. So for the outdoor lovers, this is where I would recommend. So there's 3 state parks right outside: the Platte River State Park, Mahoney State Park, and Schramm State Recreational Area. And one awesome thing that I think in this area, you can rent or some glamping cabins. So in the Platte River State Park, they actually have glamping cabins that you can rent, stay out in nature. And here is where tanking is going to come into play.
Oh, I would have been so disappointed if we had not gotten into tanking, because I heard about it from the head of the tourism in Nebraska.
Actually, it's going to be mentioned multiple times because it's really become a huge thing.
Sure.
For good reason. Okay, so the Elkhorn River runs very close by. So you can either do tubing, which is just as it sounds. You can sit on a tube and tube down the Elkhorn River, or you can go tanking. And for people that have never heard of tanking before, you have a livestock tank that you have chairs in and you sit in it. Typically a cooler is going to be on the inside and you float down the river.
And it holds about 4 people, 6 people?
Yeah, that's it. I actually called the company that runs the websites tankdown.com for Elkhorn.
Okay.
And they said the maximum is 4 people, but they can do just 2 people as well.
Okay.
So I've had a tanking experience, since I'm from Nebraska. I think that you have to for a rite of passage. It is a little bit harder sometimes than you might imagine. There's some roadblocks that can get in the way. You might hit a sandbar. You have to get out and kind of paddle yourself off. And so just things to keep in mind. My foot actually got caught, it was my turn to get out and push the tank off the sandbar, and I caught my foot on the side of the tank, and then everything just kind of went downhill. I was kind of dragging behind. So just be prepared that you might have to do some physical activity versus the tube. You're just going to float and relax. And so one or the other, either or, both equally as fun. So that is right outside of Omaha. So you can do all those things just really quick. I would definitely recommend bringing at least some water, but you're welcome to bring any drinks on the river that you want to. You can bring food. You can bring board games. but just no glass bottles is all they ask. So
okay.
whatever you want to do on
So
the river, you
so you
can
could
do.
bring your beer from the local brewery, but it has to be something you can get in a can or a keg.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. A keg. There we go. So that's kind of just some outdoor things that you can do right next to Omaha. Before we move too far outside of Omaha, I also want to mention another favorite activity that I discovered while living there. So in Fort Calhoun, which is just a little bit north of Omaha, there is an alpaca farm. And on that alpaca farm, they have different events. So once again, I'd recommend checking the calendar. But you can either do wine with the alpacas or also what I did, yoga with the alpacas. And it was so fun. And disclaimer, you do not have to be good at yoga. I am very mediocre at best. And it was amazing. So it's set out on this hill and all the alpacas are just kind of roaming around you as you have an instructor guiding you through this yoga session. And the alpacas, they might come sit right next to you. And they're just so funny. I mean, their expressions and their little teeth. Oh, it was such a good time. And the people that specifically, it was Alpacas of the Heartland, and they are so passionate about their alpacas. And they took us in afterwards and told us all about them and how they started this. And it's quite amazing. So I would definitely recommend that if you have time.
All right.
Definitely, it's very unique, very, very unique. Okay, so let's move along to just outside of Omaha. We are going to go to Nebraska City. And one thing, being a Nebraskan, that I'm very proud of is Arbor Day, because it started in Nebraska.
I did
Arbor
not
Day,
know that.
Yes. So Arbor Day is kind of celebrating the planting of trees. And if you look up some information on Arbor Day, it can tell you like how many trees have been planted over the years. And it is an amazing foundation and holiday. So there is Arbor Day Farm that is located in Nebraska City, and you can stay at Lead Lodge, which is located on the property. There's multiple things to do in this area. The lodge itself has a pool inside of it if you're traveling with kids or if you want to go to the pool. There's nature walks that you can enjoy, or you can do wine tastings that they offer during the weekends at the lodge. It says within walking distance, there's Apple Market that you can get fresh baked pies, wine, ciders, fruits, veggies, all sorts of things.
Now, this is the second time you brought up wine, and
Yes.
and I'm only a wine snob when I leave California. So let's. I know that every state now, all 50 states have wineries. Not all 50 states grow grapes, but all 50 states have wineries. Have you had the wine? Is Nebraska wine? Would you recommend anything?
This is a perfect segue into what I was going to say next, because I would highly recommend, even if you aren't a wine drinker, just going to these areas, and the events that they hold are so fun. So while you're down in the southeastern portion of Nebraska, that's kind of where there's wineries all across the state, which we'll get to a little bit later. But this region seems to have a large concentration. And on top of it, they have awesome events. So there's a hot air balloon festival that they hold at Soaring Wings that I've attended. They also have a grape stomping competition during the harvest. And so once again, if you check out the event pages of some of these wineries, you can find some little hidden gems in there that you can attend if you happen to be in the region during that area or during that time.
And that's Soaring Wings Vineyard that we're talking about here, okay?
Yes.
Which also has a brewery.
I have never been to their brewery.
Well, they talk about brewing on their website, so.
Oh, well, there we go. So this is my ultimate recommendation is if you go to nebraskawines.com, it's going to give you a list of all the different wineries, and then you can pick one. And what I would do is get the wine passport. So you are going to get a stamp at every winery that you go to, but it also gives you a good guide on where you want to go, because it's kind of like, where the heck do I go next when you haven't been to this area before? It gives you a guide and has a little map, so it shows you exactly where you can go. If you happen to be there or go back, or just really ambitious and go to all these different wineries, there are different gift packages that you can get if you attend so many wineries, but that would probably be more than a 1 week trip.
I will have to say that it doesn't help my wine snobbery that when I go to the Nebraska wine site and I click on award-winning wines, it says page not found.
Oh,
I suspect it's just a problem with the website.
That's it.
But we might want to let them know that.
Yeah, we'll let them know that. But the wines are good. I will say that.
Okay.
And we'll get to one later that is very unique. That is down by Nebraska City. Okay, so we're going to make our way up to the Sandhills region next. But I have to mention one other thing. So I have not mentioned Lincoln, Nebraska, which is where I went to nursing school and college. I love that city. I'm not going to go into extreme detail in different things that you can do there. But if you happen to be in Nebraska in the fall, highly recommend Husker football season. Go to a game or go to a tailgate. It is unlike any energy that I have ever seen anywhere else. The fans, everybody's family, everybody's outside, grilling, having a good time. It is amazing. Just walking through the area.
Can I get tickets to go to see a Husker football game? Or do I need to inherit them?
We have the longest selling record for sellouts.
Right.
But it is possible. So you're not going to be able to just go online like you would go to a play and pick up some tickets. You're going to have to go down to the stadium or look online and see if anybody happens to be selling their tickets. So you're going to get them from somebody. Is what you're going to do. But there's truly not a bad seat in the house. I think that our capacity now is 90,000. It's quite amazing.
And if I go to a Husker football game, what color am I wearing?
Red.
Okay.
And you can wear red, white, or black, but I would highly recommend red.
Well, and for those who are not familiar with this, if you think about it, the nearest pro football to Nebraska or to Lincoln, for instance, is 3-4 hour drive. Well, Kansas City's probably the closest.
Yeah.
But,
so it's kind of split. Like some people love Kansas City and some people go to Denver. So it's kind of split half and half.
But yeah, I mean, this is as big as pro sports are or bigger in Nebraska.
It's truly, I mean, growing up, that is one of the first things that my dad taught me is how football works. And then he took our family to a Husker football game. That was an event. I mean, the excitement level was just unlike anything else. And so I just had to mention it because that's a huge part of Nebraska culture is Nebraska football.
And you say a big part of Nebraska culture. I have relatives in Nebraska and have had relatives in Nebraska since the 1800s. The Anderson part of my family moved to Nebraska in 18 something or other. And I still have relatives there. I still have cousins who live there. In fact, in the head of the Nebraska Newspaper Association has been an uncle or an aunt or a cousin of mine 3 or 4 times. And so when we were talking to them about school and what age your kids go to school, the kids in Nebraska tend to go about a year later than the kids in California. And the reason for that is so you're bigger when football comes. And it's sort of like, okay, that is completely foreign to me and the way we think out here, but that is just the way things happen in Nebraska.
Yeah, it's definitely deep rooted in us to love football and especially Husker football.
Yep. Excellent. Where to next? You were going to take us to the Sandhill area?
Yep. Okay, so next we're going to go to the Sandhills region. So once we've kind of wrapped up this area, I know not everybody's idea of vacation involves a long road trip. So at this point, you could just stay in this region, continue to visit the vineyards, go back to Omaha, spend some more time in Lincoln, and then fly out of Omaha. But if you're down for a road trip, you will not be disappointed.
Always down for a road trip.
I know. There's truly nothing better. You can listen to all the episodes of Amateur Traveler now because we're going to get in the car and we are going to drive approximately 5 hours. But I have some stops along the way.
Okay.
So we are going to drive to a little town in north central Nebraska, Taylor. Population 186. Yes, you heard me right. 186. So there has to be the most remote brewery in the whole entire world. But it is wonderful. The beers are good, and they also have cabins that hold 6 to 8 people that you can rent. And nearby, guess what? We have tanking. So the Calamus River runs really nearby. You're actually going to go out of a town named Burwell, which is about 15 minutes away from Taylor. And you can rent tubes, you can rent tanks, kayaks, canoes, all sorts of stuff from the Calamus Outfitters there, and then go down the river. So you have, if you didn't hit the first time in Elkhorn, you have a second chance in the Calamus to go tanking. Same principle. You have your livestock tank, you have your cooler.
And the brewery you were talking about, I assume, is the Bootleg Brewery.
Yes, Bootleg Brewery.
Okay.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe I didn't say that.
That's
Bootleg
all right.
Brewery, yes. You're going to have to really have your eyes out once you hit Taylor, because the mark for the Bootleg Brewery is a cowboy, and you're going to turn down a gravel road. So this is the Sandhills. I mean, you are having the authentic experience when you get out to this region because,
Okay.
I mean, the population, as I said, is so small. You're going down the gravel road and you have the Sandhills in the distance. So I just think this area of Nebraska is very unique once you hit up here.
Well, and you talk about the Sandhills, and I haven't been to this region in Nebraska. I've seen pictures of it, but what is it? I mean, it's hills and it's made of sand. I know that much, and that's really all I know. Actually, I know one more thing that we'll get to, but
Okay. It's prairie land. A lot of ranches are here, wide open spaces. One time somebody described it to me as it looks like you could just take a butter knife and just kind of slice off the top of these sand hills, because it's just like these rolling plains with these hills. They are made of sand. And in some areas, like the grass has, we call them blowouts. And so there's just areas of pure sand in these fields. There's cattle grazing, there's horses. This actually leads into something else I want to talk about in Burwell. There's rodeos in these areas, authentic rodeos that you can see bull riding, barrel racing, steer wrestling, saddle bronc riding, all sorts of stuff. And it's just definitely a unique experience that I would recommend if you have the opportunity to stop in. Nebraska's big rodeo is the one that's in Burwell.
Okay.
But there's also, I mean, as I said, there's various ones throughout the Sandhills. So if one doesn't fit into your itinerary and you really want to see what a rodeo is all about, there's many other opportunities along the way.
Oh, and I thought you were describing it. The name of it is actually Nebraska's Big Rodeo.
Yes, that's the name. That is the name. I
okay.
even confirmed and looked at their website. So
Yeah, okay.
Nebraska's Big Rodeo. Yep, in Burwell. Happens each summer.
Got it.
For such a small little area, population-wise, there's quite a lot of activities to do. Okay, so we've done our second round of tanking. We've visited the brewery. We've gone to the rodeo. Now we are going to go to an area in Long Pine, Nebraska. We're going to go to Hidden Paradise. And just as the name describes, it is a hidden paradise. So this is in Long Pine, Nebraska. It's approximately an hour away from Taylor. Population is 292. And you're going to drive through the town. Once you take the exit, there's only one road, and you're going to go to the end of the town, and there's going to be a sign that says, "This way to Hidden Paradise." And down there is the Long Pine Creek. And there are cabins built up around the creek. And this is a beautiful area to rent tubes and just tube down a little bit and then pick your tube up out of the water and walk up and go to the top. But if you look at pictures of this area, it's just unexpected. You would never expect this to be in the Sandhills. The water is really cold. It has trout in the water, and it's fed by a spring. So it's kind of a shock when you sit down, but you do get used to it. In this area, if you do choose to spend the night here, I know that this isn't very far from our last stop. You could stay in a cabin that is called the Pines, or you can just rent a tube there because you're going to need something to tube. And it's like an inner tube of a tire is kind of what you're sitting, a different tube than you would be tubing down the river in. And so you can rent those there just for the day. They're very inexpensive, and then just drop them off on your way out. So if nothing else, if you're not in the mood to go tubing down the creek, I would just recommend just walking through the area. You will not be disappointed. So we are going to move on from Long Pine and Hidden Paradise, and we are going to go just make a pit stop in Ainsworth, Nebraska.
Okay.
So I mentioned this because it's my hometown. I love this area. So one thing we're going to do while we're in Ainsworth is we are going to stop and have the best hot chai latte I've ever had at Ainsworth Flowers and Gifts. And, you know, it sounds like, oh, that's good everywhere. I've taken multiple people here to have this chai latte, and they all say, where can I get that? Because it is so good. It's so good. All the drinks are amazing, and you're going to want one after this long road trip. So we're going to stop in there on Main Street. And if you have time and you are down for a gravel road trip, you're going to go to the village of Meadville. So Meadville is located on the Niobrara River, and you're going to take Old Highway 7 and head north for 25 miles. It's a straight shot, and you're going to hit the river. In a little bit, we're going to go over tubing down the Niobrara. This isn't an area that you necessarily tube in, but it's very, very popular with the locals to just go up, and there's sandbars that you can just relax on. There's a little creek that runs into it. There's a Meadville store that you can get food at that is just this little freestanding store along this dirt road. So just kind of a unique little stop if you have the time and if you want to do maybe a different water activity than go down the creek. So that is about a 25-minute out of your way up a gravel road stop.
Okay.
So after Ainsworth, we are going to head to Valentine, which is approximately 45 miles away. And this is where we're going to tube down the Niobrara. It's very popular tubing destination. So you can rent tubes or tanks. Once again, tanking will come up. You can rent them from Valentine, and the river is a little bit ways away. So they'll do round trip transportation for you. But if you're looking to camp, you could also rent tubes from a little tiny town, Sparks. That's where my family would always start at. But you would have to drive there instead of the round trip from Valentine. It's pretty much the same concept as the Elkhorn or the Calamus, but this river does have something different than the other ones. It has a waterfall, Smith Falls. Okay. And it is a must-see. So it's a state park. It is possible to visit without tubing down the river, but I think it just kind of adds to the experience. If you tube down the river, you're going to see the sign or a lot of tubes pulled off to the side, and then you're going to walk up this little walkway, and then there's going to be Smith Falls. It's the state's highest waterfall.
It's 63 feet tall.
There we go. You know, Nebraska isn't known for having waterfalls, so I just think this is a nice, unique area to go visit. Okay, so that's along the Niobrara. Then you'll get out and they will get the tubes from you, and then they will drive you back to your starting point of Valentine. Okay. So in Valentine, you're probably going to want to rest for the night because we've had quite the drive. You can stay anywhere from a hotel such as the Niobrara Lodge, or you can have a cabin experience. There's a couple different areas where you can rent cabins, like the Niobrara River Ranch or the Lord Ranch Resorts and Cabins. Those are definitely, you would have those rural views in those two places. Also, I haven't even mentioned so far in the trip, I would stop at the Pepper Mill in Valentine, which is a steakhouse, and have some good Nebraska beef, because Nebraska is known for having wonderful, wonderful beef. If you haven't had the opportunity already in the trip, I think that would be a good opportunity to have a good Nebraska steak. So we're continuing on from Valentine after staying the night, and now we are going to go to one of our last stops. And this is Lake McConaughey. So we've kind of traveled from the southeastern part of the state up to the north central, and now we're going to go to the western part of the state.
Well, and before we leave Sandhills, there is still something we haven't mentioned. Every spring, Sandhills gets 600,000 visitors.
Yes, they do. The Sandhills cranes.
The Sandhills cranes that fly in on the national byway. What am I trying to say? One of the large flight paths of migratory birds that comes through this area. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the larger events in this area. Is if you're a bird watcher, that's one of the big reasons that people might be interested in this particular area, because they are a large bird. They're not a small bird, the sandhill crane. And is there a best place to go see that? The
Central Platte River seems to be the place to go.
Okay.
And I know that it's really popular amongst photographers as well.
Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about the Platte, then we're down closer to Highway 80 that goes across, because Highway 80, as I recall, goes right along the Platte River.
Yep.
And then 76 into Colorado is also following the Platte.
I would think it would be more specific online, but it just says the Central Platte River. So...
Okay. Well,
Okay.
we'll leave it like that.
We'll leave it.
Yeah,
Yes.
look up information if you're interested in that on the Nebraska Flyway, and that's where you're going to learn more information about the sandhill cranes. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Excellent. And then you were taking us one last spot.
Okay, so we are going to Lake McConaughey, which is outside of Ogallala, Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
But on our way, once again, because I think road trips are kind of about all the stops in between to getting to the destination, we're going to stop at one last winery. And this is Niobrara Valley Vineyard. And it's outside of Nensel, Nebraska. And it's right on your way as you go from Valentine to Ogallala. So Nensel is, once again, a very small town. And just as I said, Bootleg Brewery may be one of the most remote breweries in the world. This is the same with this vineyard, but it is worth the stop. So Nensel is a population of 20,
Okay.
20 people. If you go to the Niobrara Valley Vineyards website, they will tell you exactly what to put in your GPS to get to their winery.
Okay.
So it's located on this beautiful vineyard, and the wines are phenomenal. In fact, some of my friends have them shipped out because they enjoyed them so much going there. I think this might be the only vineyard out in this region because it is so remote. But they had this the eclipse a few years ago was we had an area of totality in Nebraska. And so they actually made a wine reflecting that a few years ago when I was there, which is pretty awesome. But I think that this vineyard just offers this really personal one-on-one experience. When I was there, my friend and I we were the only people there. Her husband was working out in the vineyard, called to her to say that we were coming. I just thought the whole experience was so personalized and wonderful. And the people that own it are so warm and welcoming and really tell you the history of how they got into it, history of the land. Really worth the stop as you go to Ogallala. And then you can say that you have been to a town of population 20, which I think is pretty awesome. And as I mentioned with the other places, look at their events website because they do have some pretty cool events. I noticed in October, they have like a murder mystery party. They have prime rib with wine nights. So definitely worth taking a peek at their events calendar. So we are going to finish off this trip. We are going to go 2 hours and 45 minutes roughly to Lake McConaughey. So it's Nebraska's largest lake and largest reservoir. It is 20 miles long and 4 miles wide. And they dammed the Platte River to make this reservoir. So an interesting fact about Lake McConaughey is there was actually a town at the bottom of the lake that flooded when they made the reservoir. And a few years ago, there was a drought so severe that you could see part of the town. And there's been just a couple other times in history that this has been able to happen. But Lake McConaughey is kind of the ultimate lake experience. You can rent pontoons, kayaks, paddle boards, all sorts of things, gorgeous sandy beaches, wonderful last stop on this Nebraska trip. And it kind of keeps with the theme, when we were in the eastern part of the state in Omaha and Lincoln, I mean, the population is larger. There's cities and things to do like that. Whereas as we make our way in the western part of the state, it's definitely more rural. And that's still the case with Ogallala and Lake McConaughey. So you have still ranches and pastures and things that you kind of think of when you think of Nebraska. And then you have this gorgeous lake where you can do all these water activities.
Excellent. There's a couple of things that I wanted to mention. We haven't mentioned anything in the national park system, even though we know that there are national parks in all the states now. Two that I would underline here would be interesting to look at, actually three. One is Fort Kearny State Historic Park. Sorry, that's not a national park, but a state park. And then south of Lincoln is the Homestead National Monument. And so if you're interested in that history of the Homestead Act, that might be an interesting place to go. And then way, way at the western edge, almost in Wyoming, is Scotts Bluff. And that's another national monument that is not flat.
No, it's not. And actually, there is a national forest, Halsey National Forest, which is up. The best way to get to it would be when you're in the Ainsworth or Valentine region. That would be the quickest way to get there. But there's also a national forest.
Excellent. The other thing I want to say that you could find at various places in Nebraska, but I'm not sure exactly where, there are places where you can find some of the wheel tracks from the Oregon Trail. And I will let you look that up if you're interested, those of you who are listening who have that kind of interest. But this is, the prairie land that they were driving across on the Oregon Trail. And so you can find that in various spots in Nebraska. Excellent. Anything else we want to cover before we get to some of our wrap-up questions?
Well, just to know, so if you did this itinerary where you're ending in Lake McConaughey, there's two options from here, what you can do. One would be to fly out of Denver because you are pretty close to that side. Since you're on that side of the state, you could wrap back up and go to Omaha would be another option and fly out there. Or I was thinking, after listening to some of your other podcasts, you could just continue on and do the South Dakota National Parks itinerary and just go up north and do that if you have more than 1 week.
Right.
Many different options for you from there. You can either fly out there or you can go back to Omaha. Yeah,
when we were up in the Sand Hills area, we were almost in South Dakota.
You're very, very close.
Yeah, we came back down when we came to Ogallala, but yeah, exactly. Excellent. You are standing in the prettiest spot in Nebraska. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
It's in the Sandhills.
Okay.
And it's sunset and you have coyotes and you see horses and cattle and it's so remote and you smell the alfalfa and it's just absolutely gorgeous. Or you're at a Husker football game and it's the Hail Mary pass and you win the game and the crowd cheers and it's just a crazy atmosphere.
A different thing of beauty, but
yes,
I got
yes.
you. Okay. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Nebraska.
Something that I did not mention is kind of a unique food that we have in Nebraska, which are Rocky Mountain oysters.
Okay.
Are you familiar with those?
They have those in the Rocky Mountains too in Colorado, but yes, I am familiar with it. Have not eaten them.
Okay. Neither have I, but there's actually...
What is a Rocky Mountain oyster for our listeners?
Well, it is a testicle of a calf is what that is, and people eat them. It's actually quite common to eat them, and I believe they're fried, perhaps. But if you are really into eating wacky things, I have the place for you. So I saw in Round the Bend Steakhouse in Ashland, Nebraska, which is right outside of Omaha, they have Rocky Mountain oysters. And you can also take a picture in front of a sign that says Home of the Testicle Festival. So that is a wacky, wacky thing that you can try. That's pretty common throughout the state.
Okay.
Yep.
on that note, if you had to summarize Nebraska in just 3 words, Gina Imm, what 3 words would you use?
Rural, unexpected, peaceful.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Gina Imm. And Gina, thank you for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love for your home state of Nebraska.
Thank you, Chris.
In news of the community, first a thank you to patrons of the show at patreon.com who are supporting the show with their contributions. The day this is coming out, we will have had a monthly Zoom call, and I'm really enjoying those. If you're looking for a way to support yourself and the show at the same time, go to amateurtraveler.com/affiliates. If you buy through there, you can sometimes save yourself some money. For instance, if you go to amateurtraveler.com/Airbnb, you can save $35 on your first rental of an Airbnb property, including my house. It seems I've gotten quite far behind in terms of sharing some of the reviews that I've gotten on the show. And so I'm going to go back to actually some that I got in February that I have not talked about yet. I heard from Judy from Australia who said, very helpful for planning your travels, and the host is great at drawing out information from the guest. Thank you, Judy. And then one from Sam from the United States who said, Chris has a passion for travel experiences and stories, which you can hear on Amateur Traveler. I listened to over 100 different podcasts, and only a few are so compelling that I go back to the archives and listen to every one from the start. Oh my gosh. Amateur Traveler has been running since 2005 and includes many famous and obscure international countries and territories, but Amateur Traveler also has domestic cities and destinations in the U.S. too. For any wannabe world traveler or person interested in really informative storytelling, give Amateur Traveler a try. Thanks so much, Sam. And then finally, I heard from Julesy from the U.S. also, who said, this is a podcast I've been looking for. I can't believe it took me so long to find it. I'm very new to podcast world in general, having only listened to a few true crime podcasts to start. I feel like I've read this one before, but this is where it's at. I've traveled a fair amount, mostly domestically, but dream about lots of international travels. Literally everywhere is on my bucket list. This podcast fulfills my itch to learn more about exotic and domestic locations between my travels. Chris is interesting and knowledgeable. I am currently binging on the hundreds of episodes. Let's say I'm in traveler's heaven. Thanks so much, Julesy. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode or a review for the show. And thanks so much for listening.
Got to see one more cathedral. Got to sit in one more cafe.